Hello there. Welcome to my reaction to VFX artists react to No Way Home, bad and great CGI. I didn't know what to react to, so this is recommended, and I've seen a couple of videos from Corridor Crew, a couple of videos about them reacting to good and bad CGI, and they go into detail, which is very interesting, and I want to see what they're going to talk about here. Because again, for me, it's interesting. I don't know about you. Also, I'm gonna say, if you haven't seen No Way Home, there are probably gonna be spoilers in this one. Just putting it out there. Either way, like, comment, subscribe, and let's begin.
How do you de-age somebody's face? What's the technique that goes into it?
That's just all against blue screen, and it's so effective.
The lightning flashes going on is actually hitting him there. That couldn't have been in the original movie.
Yeah. Catching the brick. That was like originally not a brick.
Wait, really? I would say that that secret did not leak.
Boom.
I mean, except for this shot. This shot got out
frame.
there.
The leaks fucking
Big
hate
thanks
it.
to Raycon for sponsoring today's episode. Stick around to the end to see how you can get 15% off your purchase
Oh my
of premium
God.
everyday earbuds.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Visual Effects Artists React. We are joined today by Kelly Port, an amazing artist and supervisor who's worked on a bunch of amazing films. Kelly, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I started 29 years ago with Digital Domain.
Damn.
Strange Days was my first film. Worked on Apollo 13, Fifth Element, Titanic.
I've seen Fifth
and
Element
most
out of
recently been
these.
on a Disney Marvel kick with Beauty and the Beast, Maleficent, Avengers, Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, and then most recently Spider-Man No Way Home as the production side supervisor.
So I've seen like
Have you
4
worked on any,
movies
like,
at
big
both
films?
that he worked on.
On my last 3 films, if you look at gross worldwide box office, their numbers 1, 2, and 3 are my last 3 films, which is pretty
Wow.
crazy.
So
Yeah,
do you get any sleep?
I
Probably
don't get
because
any
of you,
sleep,
man.
and I don't get any of that box office.
So, you're a visual effects artist. Got it. Dude, I remember seeing this shot where they're both flying through the city, and it's like, okay, Zendaya's face is obviously real there, but nothing else, I imagine, is real at all.
What was so fun about that, they used something similar in Far From Home, this technique that was just crazy
Yeah.
simple. John Watts, I think, came up
Because
with it, but it
continuations,
was just
it makes
this
sense.
fun sort of doggy cam style where they're kind of on bungee wires and getting pulled by stunt guys, you know, left and right, and tugged this way, left and right, and he would try to use his arms as he's webbing, and then they would try to kind of do that in sync. And then they had a giant, you know, fan blowing on her, and then her face is just so perfect, like she looks terrified.
Yeah.
And really, that's just all against blue screen.
Good
And
actress.
it's so effective, and it's so simple too. Some of the challenge comes in is putting that virtual camera through that virtual city, because all that stuff behind them, you know, we can't
it's like
shoot
pre-made
drones. There's
city.
restrictions on shooting drones within the city. What's interesting is like trying to find those angles, trying to find the arc of the swing. And so typically the guys would animate a swing and find that arc and then put that
Alright.
virtual camera behind that.
Something I'm noticing about the sequence here is the lighting. So if you're swinging through a city like this, the direction of the sun is going to change relative to the angle of this chest-mounted camera, but also I'm noticing shadows quickly flying over her head there. So was that done on set with like flags blocking the light just really quickly and you're having to match that, or is that a digital shadow?
It's a little bit of both, but it's primarily
Oh.
in camera. So what you want to do is have a consistent sun angle and then just block it, you know,
Okay,
to
yeah.
get that sort of tempo. We would do camera tests about like how frequent we thought that would be, and this just felt right. So if it was too rapid, it would look weird. If it
Yeah.
wasn't rapid enough, it would look weird. So it's like finding that Goldilocks sort of rhythm.
I do see one thing here, which is like a nightmare for me, which is motion blurred curly hair that's frizzy on a blue or green screen. So how the heck did you do that? How did you key your hair, like make it look so clean? It's like all over the place. It's moving. It's frizzy.
This one was a little bit harder because the camera was so active, and it's one of those screens where you saw a little bit of the back wall, you saw a little bit of things like blocking the lights, and then you saw some painted, very dirty blue floor that people have been
yeah.
walking on. So it makes it even more challenging when you have those kind of things
Because now you're having
happen.
to actually create mats from rotoscoping.
One of the tricks that I've learned, what you can do is take alternate takes, even sometimes the same take, where the camera's relatively locked off. where you can really pull a nice, good key, and you can take just flying hair. You stabilize that, and then you track that onto her
wow.
own
Oh my
hair.
goodness.
So it's
That's
her hair
pretty
being
sick.
tracked onto her, but it's not her hair at that moment. It's from like some other piece.
Wow.
I am your hair from the future.
Yeah.
That's really clever.
Yeah. Nice way out of
So,
that
you know,
situation.
they have Tom Holland in the actual Spider-Man suit on set, but you end up replacing the suit to make it unify everything together later on. How much of that suit is real versus CG?
In this particular case, it's mostly real.
Okay.
Probably in action it's
very
more CG.
perfect, right? Like it's very smooth, and you want to see the muscles. You don't want to see stitching or too bad of wrinkles. you
Yeah.
know? So sometimes that's traditional 2D kinds of cleanup. Sometimes it's easier, given the circumstances, to just render and light a CG suit in there to help with that cleanup process.
Peter, you may have dodged your legal troubles, but things will get much worse.
With Murdoch here,
There we go. I wanna
pitching
hear
the
this.
brick, that was like originally not a brick.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Wait,
Wow.
was it
It
like a
wa-
hot dog or something? Like,
It was a snow globe.
A snow globe.
Yeah.
Oh.
And
Huh.
so that's one of those creative decisions that came after the fact.
So that shot where Tom Holland grabs the brick away from Daredevil there.
He's actually grabbing a snow globe.
So are those CG fingers on his hand?
You can see it's more of a sphere shape.
Yeah, I guess he does kind of
Yeah,
grab like the
he
sides
does
of the
grab
brick
it
with his two
weird.
fingers.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a weird way to get a
Yeah.
grab a brick.
and same thing with Murdoch there at the beginning. Like, so he grabs the brick there and he has it there. So,
But you can tell
kinda-
kind of by the shape of his
Yeah,
palm,
it's a
he's actually
sphere.
grabbing something more spherical.
especially with Tom Holland there with his hands out like in a sphere shape like this, as opposed to like brick shape. I had no idea about that. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's one of those things like
It's
you
a little
don't
detail
necessarily pick
you'll
up on.
never notice,
Hopefully
yeah.
not, but
I mean, they're invisible.
Yeah.
That's the point.
yeah.
And all these invisible effects, the thing that always gets me is that they're not filmed like effect shots. They're filmed like normal shots where you have the extras, the set, or the locations locked down. And the fact that the cinematography doesn't change is kind of what keeps those shots being triggered in my mind as visual effect shots. I just see them as normal shots.
Yeah, and that's what you want. You
Yeah.
know, you don't want to be taken out of the movie. That's the worst thing. I mean, this is why I love visual effects just in general. Is it never gets boring. It's always evolving. The projects are different. The people,
Yeah.
the teams. It always keeps.
It's
it
like he
fresh.
worked for what? He said 29 years. When he started working on like CGI stuff, that was a completely different technology from what it is now. And it's probably, to do the things he does now, it's much easier than if he wanted to do the same things 29 years ago. Not just with his experience, but with the technology that was available. And vice versa, where whatever he wanted to do 29 years ago, it would have been better, easier to do now.
And fun.
I always love learning fascinating, interesting things. So leave a comment down below with what you think is the coolest fun fact of a visual effect in a movie, and maybe we'll explain why.
In the movie The Talking Cat, they CGI the mouth.
So there's a lot of talk about de-aging.
You couldn't
It's
tell.
been a thing in visual effects now for like 15, 20 years, I feel like. How do you de-age somebody's face? What's the technique that goes into it?
It's a bunch of different techniques. Some studios have sort of a deep fake type of technique. There's a lot of proprietary facial tracking that goes into it. And then they essentially just track that on and have to relight it. But it's also kind of pushing, tucking, and pulling. There's all these sort of characteristics that happen as a human being ages. And those are the things that you just basically have to now correct for. And
Yeah,
you
like
can
elasticity
overcorrect
of the
for it and
skin.
start to look too young or too different. And so we try to
Yeah.
do our best to keep it pretty subtle, but just have it ring more towards what he looked like in that previous film.
But it really seems like de-aging is a catch-all term for like 10 different actual techniques happening. Like sometimes it's a straight up 3D model. Sometimes you're just doing a little bit of warping to 2D footage. Sometimes it's texture work that's like tracked onto the face. Sometimes it's AI-based stuff. But it seems like really it's a whole bunch of different techniques all being applied in different ways to achieve ideally the same goal. And it just really depends on the shot that you're doing.
Yeah, and I don't think
It's the
there's
best way to
really
do
any
it,
one
to use
technique that's
multiple.
better necessarily. I think it's just different approaches to solve the same problem.
Makes sense. Yeah.
This was so great when Toby and Andrew and Tom were all there, because it was pretty, obviously, as you can imagine, very hush-hush. And it was just such a great vibe to have them all there. Definitely the set was a buzz.
This is obviously an incredibly major secret, and I would say that except for this shot, this shot got out there. We made a video about it, but like this was a successfully kept secret. Like no one actually knew for fact that these two were in it, let alone in it as much as they were. What are some of the problems involved with
There are
trying to keep
rumors and
such an
guesses,
important
but
secret?
It's just thousands of people. Like our visual effects team is by far the biggest team there is.
Well,
and
yeah.
often the leaks don't necessarily come from visual effects. In this case, I think they did, or an outsourced vendor, I think was where it really came from. I think the main thing that keeps people from doing it is like they're just gonna lose their job.
Yeah.
Like forever. As a studio, when Marvel, Sony sends over a sequence
trust
to a
would be
visual
over.
effects studio to begin work, we call that a turnover. And then when they get that, it's usually sent as a sequence and your name is like watermarked across the whole thing. So it's either the visual effects producer or the name of the studio. And that's sort of the preventative medicine, I guess.
You're not Peter Parker.
One of the final trailers of this movie to drop had like Spider-Man going up against the Sandman, the Lizard, Electro, all in like this climactic shot, and then it ends, and it's like, oh man, I'm so hyped.
Are you
for
gonna
the
talk
movie.
about
But I
Brazil
guess
version?
was it Brazil?
Yeah.
That shot in that trailer was extended another like 15 frames or so, like a half second, and it was just enough to show the Lizard there get hit by a ghost.
Yep.
Obviously, we're seeing these shots that
How
are
would you fuck
different
that
from the
up?
final thing, but it's not just simply a matter of like, oh, we just turned off the Spider-Man layer. Are these shots created specifically for the trailers?
Good
Yes.
question, actually.
What all is involved with having to make that happen?
So we literally just remove them from the renders. And if there's shadows, we have to, account for those. So they just remove the Andrew and Toby layers.
So it kind of maybe is a little bit of just straight up turning off the layer.
Yeah.
All right. I find it really
Oh, okay.
interesting that there's a lot of
I thought they were like they added them in, they rendered them in, added them shadows and all that stuff, and then they have to, out of already completed render, do the opposite and delete them again, delete their shadows and all that stuff. So I guess it's just like double work. I don't
visual
know.
effects work being done just for the marketing purposes rather than the final product.
Sometimes you also see it's the same shot, like it's a similar shot from the movie, but it's a different take.
I'm Peter, by the way.
Doctor Strange.
Oh, you're using your made-up names. I'm Peter, by the way.
Doctor Strange.
Oh, you're using your made-up names.
That happens
Yeah.
sometimes too. But yeah, sometimes there's a trailer-only shot. It's just additional extra material that's fun to see that you wouldn't necessarily see in the film.
Fair point, yeah.
Some people get annoyed by it if they don't see the moments from the trailer in the actual
It was
movie.
really cool to not only see the three Spider-Man character finally come together, that was very cathartic, but also to have all of these villains from the previous movies come back together. But I also noticed that Lizard and Sandman here are basically in their CG versions the whole time, but we only see small little clips of them as their
And
real
those clips
people.
are from
Did
the
they
old
film
movies.
anything for this?
They did not. We didn't really have access to Resiphons or Thomas Hayden Church, so we actually ended up using
I don't
footage
understand why,
from the
though.
previous films and manipulating it. So Resiphons, when he's healing, we actually used an outtake, and that was shot on film, scanned at high resolution, tracked, body tracked, everything. So ultimately ended up being a lot of that CG, especially for Thomas Hayden Church when he's transforming. We had to manipulate it to get him into the scene, lighting-wise, and all sorts of things like that.
But you're still using the footage as kind of like a base texture, like
as
a
a base
diffuse
layer.
texture?
Yeah,
Okay, sure.
yeah.
Because I noticed like he's got sand pouring down his face, so obviously you had to have had like a 3D model of his face remade and matched in so that you can have that new particle sim of sand falling down.
Yeah.
The lightning flashes going on is actually hitting him there. That couldn't have been in the original movie.
Yeah, and we have the 3D model of him, and like you said, we had to have that for the sand simulation anyway. So you can also use that as a way to manipulate the lighting as well.
So that chart right there, is that a full 3D model, or is that footage of him that you guys are kind of then manipulating
It's
from
both.
Spider-Man 2 or
Both.
Spider-Man 3?
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Where's the box, Peter?
With No Way Home, we had an opportunity to see what's effectively a full CG character realized at a different era with VFX technology. So we had Sandman back with Spider-Man 3, and it was a pretty big deal to have grain simulations and that many particles on screen at the same time.
But
and
again,
then you guys
technology
revisited
evolved.
Sandman here. How did the technology change between those two films with almost a decade and a half, if not 2 decades between them?
Certainly technology has changed in a big way. More effective simulations, the power to compute more is certainly improved in 10 years dramatically. Ultimately, in some of these big simulations, they were like 300 million particles or something like that. It's like really crazy.
That's a lot.
But they're big simulations, and Chris Wagner of
That is a lot.
ImageWorks would remind me of that all the time. Like, if I had notes, it's like, okay, just reminding you that these are very big simulations.
But I feel like that's also very reasonable. It's like you have like this whole sequence. It took hours, if not days, and so many gigabytes or terabytes to simulate all this stuff. And then it's like, well, I wanted this one little thing in this one corner here to be different. But in order to make that change, you have to redo it all.
Yeah.
That's how simulations work.
Yeah, you use what you have. So in that sense, nothing has changed in 10 years. Like, what really has changed is the ability to iterate more, but because, yes, you can iterate more, but you're iterating with more. So you're always pushing that technology to its breaking point.
Gotcha. So as
It
technology
makes
gets
sense,
better, you're
yeah.
just turning up the number of particles and it still takes the same amount of time
Exactly.
to render.
Yeah.
That's really funny. If you think Spider-Man shooting web out of his wrist naturally is the way it should be,
No.
subscribe. If you think shooting it with machines that Tony Stark
Creepy.
made for him is the way it should be, hit the notification bell.
No.
Hello, everybody, and
Necessarily
welcome
Tony
back
Stark.
to the Brandy O'Daniel segment, courtesy of today's sponsor, Raycon. Now, if you're already
Okay.
ready to click away, let me tell
That's
you
pretty
something.
nice
This
insight into
show
the thing.
would not be possible but for the sponsors. And
We're gonna
also,
keep it
of course,
running.
you, the beloved viewer, and, you know, of course, us, the content creators.
but I'll say my
you know,
thoughts
look,
now,
it's
which
like a trifecta,
it's just a good
okay?
video.
Trinity of perfection. And we all hold hands and skip merrily.
I'm getting
right
distracted.
shadow to allow this show
I need to
be
learn
possible.
how to just
Because if it
talk.
wasn't for you, the viewer, and if it wasn't for
Not
the
about
sponsor,
the
and it wasn't for
thing
us,
on the screen.
content
Anyway.
creator, this episode wouldn't
It's a good video,
exist at
yeah.
all. And that's just a shame.
Very
You
nice
know,
insight
it's
into the
more
movie,
of a
how
shame
the things
paying full
working
price
out.
for premium earbuds. Well, that's a thing of the past. Come on, guys.
I'll turn the
With
sound
Raycon,
off
you
for
can get
myself. Anyway.
premium audio for half the price as any other premium.
It's a nice
software
insight,
earbud.
how the aging
Now,
works.
how
That was
does it
interesting
use?
for me as well.
It's actually quite simple.
Because
Raycon prioritizes the
The
quality
last thing I
of the
heard, it is
consumer
like
first
deepfake, and that's all I
foremost. You see,
knew
Raycon
about it that they
optimizes
took.
their earbuds with
Like there was a
gel
moment
tips
with
for the
Robert
perfect
Downey
ear
Jr. in
fit.
one of the
Now, we think that's
previous
very important
Marvel
because if you're
movies.
going to wear these things
He was
every
de-aged,
day,
and they say
whether
that
it's to the
they took
gym, to work,
like
to
his
the
young
office,
face from a
commute,
different movie, and then they
wherever,
just
however
layered it
you
on
need them,
top,
they're going to fit in your ears and not
which
fall
sounds
out. We've done
like
extensive
easy, not that much
experimentation,
work.
and these earbuds, they won't budge. In
And
addition to
usually
they
that
have
leads
over
to it
8
not
hours
looking
of
good, but it did
playtime
look
with
good,
a
so it probably
32-hour battery life.
had
So
more
these things are gonna go all
things
day
done than whatever
sounding
was
and
said.
feeling great.
And
if you don't believe
hearing
me, well,
that
guess what? Raycon earbuds have
multiple
over
technologies are used
48,000
just
five-star
for like
reviews.
one
If that
person, one
doesn't
character
say
to
quality,
de-age
then
them
I
is,
don't know what
yeah,
does anymore.
it makes
So go
sense.
on and hop, skip, and jump merrily with
Also,
us
there was
for
Goblin
sharing
in the
Corridor
thumbnail,
Crew.
Green Goblin, but
buy.com/Corridor Crew to get
there was
15%
nothing in
off
the
your
video
purchase.
about the
That's
Green Goblin.
15% off your purchase.
Fucking
by going
liars.
to buyraycon.com/Corridor
Because
Crew. Once
he was
again,
also
huge
de-aged,
thanks to
right?
Raycon for
Think
sponsoring,
so.
And now let's get
Yeah,
back to the
he
episode.
must have been because
Thank you
William
so
Dafoe
much
is
for watching. Kelly, thank you so much.
okay. William
get
Dafoe
back to
is
the
a
episode.
bit old.
Thank you so much for watching. Kelly, thank you so much for coming on the couch with us. I enjoyed everything you've told
know,
us
they
today.
came on the
I learned
couch
a lot
together.
and
Ooh.
had a lot of fascinating insights to these movies. So thank you. Seriously, I really appreciate
Oh,
the time
that
you
break
spent for us.
thing was
Thank you.
fantastic
It's
as
great
well.
being here.
Also, we have extended reacts on our website, corridordigital.com, where it's a little less cut down. You get to hear a little bit more of Kelly and our take on things, corridordigital.com. And we'll see you guys either tomorrow for our Sunday video or next Saturday if for some reason you don't watch the Sunday videos. All right, see you then.
Okay. Yeah. I wonder why they did it with the snow globe. It's just because if he doesn't catch it, it's fragile, and he needs to like firmly grasp it for it not to fall out of the hand. So the snowball doesn't break, and then they just CGI'd the brick in. The brick is big enough to cover mostly the snowball, except for the shape, but it would be noticed in like a few seconds that the hand is on the screen, and nobody would think that anyway. Just you catching a thing, and I think normally, for the normal person, you catch it as is, not like he was talking about, like, it's the brick, so you like this grasp. But I think like you just, if you're catching something, you're gonna catch it as is, like more surface area, so you would hold it like this, and when it's gonna hit you, if it's a brick, then it's gonna clasp it. When he was given it, maybe that would have been more brickish, but who fucking cares? I don't know. It's a good video. All I want to say. Thank anybody who watched this. I appreciate it a lot, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye. Have a great life. Because one of us has to.